It's another fine day at Camp Dynasty. I am Counselor Austin, joined by Counselor Collin, and it's draft season, baby.
Official. It's officially draft season.
Been waiting.
How does that feel?
Been waiting for it.
Yeah.
I gotta say. I mean, the college football grind is fun. It's how we get to this point. It's how we learn a lot about the players we're going to be talking about today. But really, it's all about this and the road, where this leads. And it coincides with week 14 in the NFL, which is the traditional end of the road for the fantasy regular season. So as some teams are preparing for playoff matchups, championship runs, others are already turning their eyes to what is next in the upcoming summer with any draft picks that they may have. And that's what we're going to be talking about today, because we're kicking it off with our second rookie mock of the year.
Yeah, people, we're looking forward to the future of the franchise now. Maybe things didn't bounce your way, but you collected some first-round picks along the way. Looking into 2024, and I mean, no better time than now to start looking for the guys.
Definitely not. And there's a lot of good ones. There's
That's
a
right.
lot of good guys. Hey, I got 7th overall. Who am I going to get? Well, spoiler, you're going to get a really good player. That's what I'm saying.
Like, I ended up with a mid first. Like, this isn't going to be,
well,
we'll see.
Yeah. But we'll get into it. Positional groups, there's discussions to be had. How is the board gonna play out here? I am gonna flip a coin in live time here, because I have been flipping coins for months and I keep losing. So I'm gonna do it on air right now. Hopefully turn the tides. Who will be picking number 1 overall? This will be a 1-round 12 pick 2024 rookie mock. And the first pick, Collin, goes to, we did it. It's heads.
Oh, did you do it on a computer?
Yeah, I did.
All right.
We got to go back. I did this for
okay.
6 weeks, with a real coin, and now we gotta turn the tides. Right. And I'm gonna get the easiest pick in the draft right now. So, all right, let's kick it off. First overall, 2024. It's no surprise if you've been listening to us for the last 3 months. If you've consumed any sort of draft content, any sort of dynasty rookie content, you already know that this pick is Marvin Harrison Jr., the wide receiver from Ohio State. Will not matter. The landing spot has no impact on this. Obviously, we hope that he will go to a team where he will flourish. There are a few teams right now at that top of the NFL draft range that aren't exactly super appealing wide receiver landing spots, but this is the sort of player that can change that trajectory, the sort of player that can come into the room, be the guy from week 1 and on. Obviously, we've talked a lot about Marvin. We're going to talk a lot more about Marvin when we get into our positional rankings. This is the first bookend in the draft cycle. We get the mock draft into the positional rankings, come back with a big board update. This is all to just fill space, because I don't know what else I can say about Marvin Harrison Jr. that hasn't been said already. He is just that sort of a talent.
Marvin Harrison Jr. won the Biletnikoff Award. We should mention that, because last we spoke, awards were not announced yet. So Marvin got his makeup Biletnikoff Award, which we don't have to get into all of it. I can talk about it a little later, my qualms with this whole situation. But he had a fantastic season with a bad quarterback. And I just kind of imagine what it could have looked like with CJ Stroud under center this year, and if there would have been any question, because I feel like now there's starting to be, it's take season where you start to plant your flag on things, and, people want to get impressions, whatever. So people are saying like, well, Marvin Harrison Jr. is not actually, what are we talking about here? He had a worse season this year. Why aren't people talking about this? Malik Neighbors had, so many yards. He should have won the Biletnikoff. But Marvin Harrison Jr. is the no doubt player in this class. He's a generational type of talent. He's got the size. He's got the route running. He's got the contested catch. He's got the feet around the sideline. I mean, great hands. Like, there is nary a flaw in Marvin Harrison Jr.'s game. So I think don't overthink things here. This is it.
Yeah, we'll obviously talk about another player that you just referenced there shortly, and there are conversations to have with these two wide receiver talents at the top of this draft. But the conversation is not which one's better, and it's not. I think the statistics are. I'm glad you brought that up, because we see the statistical, similarity, and that's really what it was. Like, it was not a regressed season for Marvin in most areas. Like, this was almost an identical season from last year, like almost like to a target. It was very similar targets, very similar yards, the same amount of touchdowns. Like, he did all of what he did last year with a much worse quarterback.
Like,
much worse.
It cannot be overstated.
Yeah. So when you put it into context, this actually is an incredibly, a season in which he built on that 2022 campaign. Even if the stats tell you one thing, you can see it with your eyes, the difference in this offense and how much he meant to this offense. That's how he gets himself into the Heisman finalist conversation. It is a product of his impact to the Ohio State football team at the wide receiver position, which is not something that is always easy to do, to transcend a quarterback and be this sort of a player. So he is that guy, and he will come into Dynasty as a top 5 rookie wide receiver, a top 5 Dynasty wide receiver as a rookie. I am very confident in saying that.
Out of 11 games, 11 full games, because he left early from one game with the ankle injury, he did not eclipse 100 yards 3 total times, and he did not score a touchdown in one game. This is games that he played the full game. He scored a touchdown every game but one.
Yeah.
It's just ridiculous.
The last 8 games of the season.
Yeah.
The last 8 games of the season, he had at least one touchdown in each game. 3 games with 2.
Yep. So you're looking at a model of consistency right here. Even if he's not putting up the gaudy totals, he's a great red zone target. I mean, you can't guard him one-on-one. It's the complete package. This is, one of the best wide receiver prospects I've seen. So,
yep. 100%, man. And all right, here's where we might get a little interesting, because I'm not entirely certain where we are at this point, but number 2 overall, when we did this back in the summer, this was a point in the conversation in which we had a little bit of a discourse about Brock Bowers as a tight end going 2nd overall. Course of this season, maybe some things have changed. You control the number 2 pick in this draft. Where are you going with it?
We did have the conversations about Brock Bowers. I ended up putting Brock Bowers at 3 in the midseason. I don't remember where you had him, but I can double check. But
I might have had him. I might have still kept him at 2.
I believe it. I know you were like Kyle Pitts. That was the argument for him. It's like Kyle Pitts is great and Brock Bowers is better, and
we see that touchdown this week.
I did. It was nice. But my number 2 overall pick is going to be wide receiver again, like it was in the midseason. It's going to be a different wide receiver. It'll be Malik Neighbors. Talk about improvement from a player. Marvin Harrison Jr. on one side, who is a complete player, was a complete player last year, could have came out and would have been, a top half of the first-round draft pick. This guy was good on that LSU team in 2022. He wasn't a superstar. He was kind of like budding. His name was around. There was still, eyes were on Kayshawn a little bit because he was a 2023 guy. And so this LSU offense wasn't what it became in the 2023-2024 season. So this year, he strips away everything that it was last year, all of the bad vibes with LSU, all of the ugly offense with Jaden Daniels, and he just becomes a certified bona fide number one guy. I mean, 1,500 yards, 14 touchdowns. Now I'm going to get into this because this is bothering me.
Oh, boy.
Jalen Hyatt won the Blitnikoff last year. This ruined all of the awards in 2023. If Marvin Harrison Jr. just wins the Blitnikoff last year, then they don't feel like they have to give him an award this year. And they can give Malik Neighbors the Blitnikoff this year. And then they don't have. So my big brain thought is they didn't want to give two LSU players an award. And Jane Daniels was the Heisman. So Neighbors couldn't be the Blitnikoff because they went 9-3. So if Marvin Harrison Jr. gets a Blitnikoff last year, Neighbors can get the Blitnikoff this year, and then Michael Penix could get the Heisman this year.
That's the politics of award season, man. This is what they don't tell you about it. That's
right. It's the butterfly effect. A drop in the pond sends out the ripples, and
I get it. And I mean, you're right. I blame everything on Jalen Hyatt to this day. I mean, but
he's going for 150 and 2 touchdowns against the Packers tonight.
Yeah. Oh God. Well, let's hope that doesn't happen. But also Malik Neighbors, I mean, awards aside, yes, it was an ultimate snub. I was very shocked and a little bit saddened that this season was not recognized because it was very special. But honestly, more importantly, this player as an NFL wide receiver prospect is special. Like I said this a few weeks ago, the gap between Marvin and Neighbors is not extreme. Marvin is not in like a tier, like he might be in a tier of his own if you're going to create like a generational tier for him. But on a talent basis, I think Neighbors is giving you at least 80% of what Marvin's giving you. At least. I mean, he is a complete wide receiver in his own right. And he doesn't have the prototypical X wide receiver size that Marvin has. Marvin obviously comes in 6'4", 205. Neighbors 6 foot, 200, plays, in the slot a fair amount, kind of splits time between the outside and the inside there, playing the flanker role across from Brian Thomas Jr. Wherever they put him, wherever they match him up, he knows how to win. And he can win at every single level. And you had a tweet thread a few weeks ago, last week maybe, that really illustrates this. I mean, go follow the man at Collin Bouressa, find the tweet thread about Malik Neighbors and watch the routes, the variety of routes that he ran. There's a limited sample here, but you can extrapolate it throughout the entire year. And that's exactly what we're going to do here when we get into wide receiver film. The variety of routes that he runs and the elite levels of separation that he can create at all levels of the field. This is one of the highest ceiling, highest floor players in the draft class. And that's why he ends up at number 2. This is a franchise building block player in Dynasty. If you didn't get Marvin and you got stuck with that number 2, do not feel terrible about it. And to be quite honest with you, there's going to be times to have these discussions. I'm not trading the farm if I have 2 to get to 1. It's not worth it. The talent is close enough where I feel confident taking Neighbors at 2 and moving forward with this player.
Yeah, I was just watching Neighbors because I was like, well, why not? This is what we do, and the amount of ways that he gets deep on people is just unbelievable. I mean, the sluggo out of the slot and the slot fade are both unreal. The way he sets up DBs and they just are in hell in one-on-one coverage. He is hitting his breaks hard, coming out of them explosive, and he is targeting one of the DB's hips. I mean, it's high level route running. He's the best route runner in the class. Like, Marvin has the physicality, he has the polish, and he has the tools. He's the better receiver, but Neighbors is the best route runner here. And I mean, I just, like you said, don't think of him as a consolation, because Marvin is Marvin. I get it. But I think this is a lot like Bijan and Jahmyr Gibbs last year, where it's 1 and 2 and then everybody else. And though Jahmyr Gibbs wasn't quite Bijan, you can see they're different types of players, and Bijan is more talented, but Gibbs is carving out that role. And I think Malik Neighbors is going to do the same thing day one, is he's going to walk in an offense and he's going to be making explosive plays. So hopefully, I mean, with all these guys, hopefully they end up in a spot that's beneficial to their skill set, but talent prevails, and this kid is talented.
Yeah. I mean, unbelievable. And this wide receiver class, we know how deep, how talented it is. We're going to have a lot of them, I think, in this mock draft today. But even with that said, I'm starting to get to a point where I think these two players are just ahead of the rest. And there are some really talented guys behind them. I think there's a bit of a tier that happens after Malik, even with how good those other players are that are coming up.
Yep, I agree.
All right. So number 3, and I just said it. I just said there's a tier break between wide receivers, and you already know that I'm going to take Brock Bowers at number 3 overall.
Yep.
Neighbors pulls ahead for me as well. I also have him at number 2 on my board right now. Brock Bowers does not get much further down the board. I mean, the injury kind of cools the momentum a little bit in terms of getting to see the player. And when he came back, obviously he wasn't quite the same guy that we saw during that elite stretch run that he had right leading up before that injury. I'm pretty comfortable saying now, after mostly a full season here and getting closer to this point, I'm pretty comfortable saying he's a better tight end prospect than Kyle Pitts, because of the thing that you have hammered time and time again, and it's so real. He is at minimum an equal level receiving threat at the tight end position compared to Kyle Pitts, and he is already a plus blocker. And that is not something that Kyle Pitts had coming into the NFL. So he's got that well-roundedness to his game that will make him an immediate impact tight end, or at least a potential immediate impact tight end at the NFL level, and a player that I still expect to be a top 10 NFL draft pick at worst. Like, he'll be somewhere in that top 10 range. And that is, I'm not afraid to do this again and take a tight end here at 3.
Yeah, after seeing what happened with the 2023 tight end class, I think we can dispel a little bit of the bad juju around rookie tight ends. There was, yes, Kyle Pitts exists. We know. We get it. But this 2023 class with Laporta and company is looking pretty nice. Him and Kincaid and, Mayer in his limited opportunities all look good. So, maybe that'll make people more comfortable, whatever. But I have Bowers slotted at 3 as well, because when you talk about the tier break with wide receivers, it's very real. And it's just naturally that number one, you start to think, well, do I want to put my RB1 here, my QB1, my tight end one? Brock Bowers kind of just slots right in. It feels natural. Just an unbelievable blocker. And that's going to keep him on the field one way or the other. And this is not like a Darnell Washington situation last year where he was a dominant blocker and then like got some catches and a few times did something fun. No, Brock Bowers is a legitimate, like, he could be also a slot guy. I don't want to invoke like George Kittle, but that's my comp for Bowers is George Kittle, because it's like he can do things in the run game that are unbelievable. I mean, that backside trap is just bread and butter for this Georgia offense, and they missed it a lot when he was out. And then him leaking out of that is just the basis of this offense. And his stretch where he went over 100 yards in 3 straight games that you were talking about, it was based from that. It was like, give him the ball and let him run after the catch and break some tackles. So this is a guy that can do everything that a tight end can do in an elite fashion. And he's going to go so high in the NFL draft. I think his receiving upside is very high because he can be on the field day one producing.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I mean, the player that misses time and still 717 receiving yards this year, second in all tight ends in the country. I mean, he's been this player for 3 years now. Everybody has known this name. Everybody has waited for this opportunity. Will he be the unicorn, the savior of the tight ends? Well, like you said, we already have a little bit of positive momentum with the tight end position in fantasy right now, and it makes it even easier to talk yourself into this player, a franchise-changing player at the tight end position. I truly believe that. I know we just did this with Kyle Pitts, and it hasn't come to fruition quite yet, but that's no reason to discount the level of talent that Brock Bowers is, and he's a worthy high draft pick in Dynasty.
John Mackey Award winner.
He did it again, back to back.
The first player to win back-to-back Mackey Awards.
Incredible stuff.
Yeah, and that's, again, with having a high ankle sprain and missing games.
Yep.
That's special stuff.
All right. 4th overall, you are back on the board, on the clock.
That I am. This one wasn't particularly difficult for me.
Okay.
I have Keon Coleman here.
Okay.
So we had a little bit of rose-colored glasses on mid-season with Keon Coleman. We were infatuated with the highlights, and he was hitting a hot stretch there too. But the season is defined by inconsistency for Keon Coleman, and that's all right, I'd say. I mean, he still looks fantastic in every game that you watch. The athleticism is unbelievable. The red zone threat that he provides is really good. I mean, he had 11 touchdowns this year. There's just, not a lot that I dislike about Coleman. Now, he's not as polished as Neighbors or Marvin Harrison Jr., but that's not really saying a whole lot because those are 2 extraordinarily polished players. So Coleman is slotting in here just because the top 3 in this class is unreal. And Coleman, I still love him. I loved him enough to have him as my number 2 player in my midseason ranking. But he just isn't as good as the other guys. And I'm like trying to frame this as like, Keon Coleman's a great player, and you should be ecstatic that he's at number 4 for you. But like, you are missing out on the top tier of this class if you're sitting at 4. And that's that tier break that we both mentioned between the top 2 guys and then the next wide receivers.
Yeah, the top three guys are no doubters.
Right. They feel like they can't miss.
Yeah. And like obviously extenuating circumstances, things can happen, alter career trajectories, all those things. But at a prospect level, those top three guys feel foolproof. They feel like slam dunks, like they're going to be instant impact difference makers at the NFL level. Keon Coleman and this range that's coming up here a little bit is where there are some question marks that start to come in. These are still great players, but there is a little bit of that, but I need to see more of this. And with Keon Coleman, the big thing, you touched on it already, is consistency. And that's where the film study will become so important with a player like this, because you can watch enough Ohio State and enough LSU to kind of see what you need to see out of Neighbors and Marvin Harrison Jr. to be like, yeah, okay, this I'm done. Like, I get it. I know what you are. Write it in stone. Coleman is a player that, like you said, kind of just disappears at times. And it is that way when you watch Florida State as well. And that is something that can be concerning, because is it a product of the system? They're just not, drawing up the plays, looking his way, or is it, are there other circumstances that lead to a lack of targets and a lack of production? That is something we will have to answer. And the one thing with Coleman also that I do want to point out is that over the course of the early part of the season, it seemed like there was a weekly one-handed or, weekly go up in the red zone, snag it. Like, this is one of the best catches of the entire season. Down the stretch, that sort of went away, and you stopped seeing those plays from him. And in fact, his contested catch rate actually declined a little bit as the season progressed. He did only finish with 10 contested catches on 30 targets for 33%. If the player makes his money as a jump ball physical wide receiver like Keon Coleman, you'd like to see that number be higher. So all of this is to say that I think this is one of the more interesting guys when it comes to film. We're going to have to really dig into the film and see what it looked like for Keon Coleman this year. But to be quite honest with you, this was not the fourth player on my board right now.
All right. I respect that. Another thing about Coleman is there's a lot of guys on this Florida State team that, they have their running game that we've talked about a lot this year with Trey Benson, and then, the other guys who shall not be named. And then Jordan Travis, obviously his knee explodes this season late in the year. So there are some things that, like you said, I'm going to be interested to really dive in, because the flashes that you see are just like unbelievable. And I got to hope that means that this is the player that I think he is. And have to tune into the wide receiver rankings to see what the final consensus is here.
Yeah, though that's where we're going to get down and dirty, break it all down with these players. But I'm up next at number 5, and this is where I will let you in on the player that has overtaken Keon Coleman in my rankings. Coleman currently sitting at number 5. Rome Odunze is currently sitting at number 4. I talked up Rome all season. Phrase that I like to use was evolved. It felt like he had fully evolved his game to a point where, in a similar fashion to Neighbors, you came into the season you really like the player. You want to just see a little bit more in these key areas. And we saw that in a massive way with Neighbors, and Odunze was not far behind. And one of the areas that I kept coming back to when I thought about, Coleman versus Odunze, like who is the guy if I'm sitting at 4, is just the fact that I think Rome has been a really, really solid route runner all year, and he has completely developed into that jump ball winner that we wanted him to become, that we said there are flashes of this. Let's just get a little bit of consistency in this area, and you can start to project as a real complete number 1 wide receiver prospect. And I think that's what we saw from Odunze this season. Obviously, Michael Penix has a phenomenal year. He leaned on Odunze a lot down the stretch. The wide receiver room, we know it's talented. We know there are other guys here. Rome came into kind of a class of his own down the stretch. And this run here of games, the last 4 games where Washington is battling into this playoff position, Odunze was 7 for 10 on contested catches during that stretch, where he just kind of took over 100 yards receiving in every single one of those games, with 6 touchdowns during that final 4-game stretch, 70% contested catches. I mean, he just became a dominant force as the season progressed. And I think that was enough for me at this point in time to say, this is a slam dunk number 1 wide receiver prospect in the NFL.
I remember I was ready to have Rome Odunze be my wide receiver 2.
I know you were.
And I have him in my 5 spot. So it sounds like we had him flip-flopped.
Yep.
Yeah. But Odunze just plays great football. Like top to bottom, he has great hands. He's reliable. Like you said, we saw flashes. We saw some spots where it's like, man, Odunze can go up and get it. And then you look at the numbers and it's like, well, he doesn't have a ton of contested catches. What's up with that? And then, he walks into this year and converts an absurd amount of contested catches. That's what you see out of this player, is he's open a lot. And when he's not open, he's still getting the ball. This is a guy that can be a target hog because a quarterback is going to love him. So I don't have anything bad to say about Odunze. I mean, this wide receiver class is unbelievable. I mean, if you are a wide receiver needy team going into this draft, this 2024 draft, and you have some picks, you're going to be coming out feeling great. And we're at pick 5, and we have 4 receivers off the board. Like, yes, if you need a running back, maybe you're starting to worry a little bit. You're like, hold on, wait, we don't have top 5 picks. This is not right. But it's a testament to this wide receiver class just as much.
And it's 4 wide receivers that all have a pathway to being a wide receiver 1.
Yeah.
Like, these are not just like, oh yeah, these are good wide receivers. Like last year at this point in the draft, you're in the midst of that Zay Flowers, Addison, Quentin Johnston tier. This year, pick 5 is like a number 1 wide receiver in the NFL and a no doubter, like it's that sort of a situation. So yes, if you are a running back needy team, it's a little bit sad, but at the same time, talent prevails. And this class, we're 5 in already. This class has franchise changing players all the way down into the mid first. That's what I think about these guys. That's how high I am on them already. And it's just exciting to know that, this can only grow from here as we get more and more into the tape from this season.
We also have 4 wide receivers that play different types of football.
Yep.
Which I think is very interesting because, you have Marvin who, can play anywhere, but really is a true X. You have Neighbors who can be a Y, can be a flanker. He can play X, but he's better in the other 2 roles. You have Coleman who is X jump ball highlight receiver. And then you have Odunze, who is a jack of all trades, master of none, that can just get it done however you need him to on any given play. So I think it's interesting that you have all these archetypes of wide receivers within this cluster, this top five, and then Brock Bowers, who is a receiver in his own right, but can also lay it down on the offensive line.
So this is where I think the draft starts to get a little bit interesting here, where our boards could start to split apart a little bit here. 6th overall, you are on the clock.
Taking my RB1. It's time. Taking Braylon Allen.
Ooh.
Yep. So Braylon Allen was a enigmatic player this year. Let's say that. But I still think that he's a player that has the ability to control a running back room in the NFL. And I think his age is really the biggest signifier here. Everybody mentioned it. We all know he'll be 20 on draft day. It's crazy that he has 3 seasons of college football under his belt. He did declare for the NFL draft, so he is for sure in. But it was a up and down season for Braylon Allen. But I think that there's a workhorse running back here that can catch passes, even if there's not a ton of efficiency there. This Badgers offense was not as improved as I would have hoped it to be. It was still a little bit ugly. It wasn't as bad as it was in past years. There was definitely some improvement in the passing game, and they didn't have to lean on him as much as they did previously. I mean, he had 50 less attempts on the ground this year than he did last year. So last year he had 230 carries. This year only 181, and had the same amount of yards per carry, and then more touchdowns. So last year he had 11 touchdowns, this year at 12. So they didn't run the tread off the tires, which I appreciate. But he did get banged up a little bit this year. He got a few injuries that he sustained. The fumbling was an issue, and we've talked about that a few times. But the physicality of Braylon Allen, the size, the speed, the talent, the age, I mean, all of it lines up to be a really good dynasty running back that has a path to a ton of carries for a team.
Yeah, he's enigmatic was a good word to use, because I'm having a difficult time understanding what I think about Braylon Allen. And that is a product of a lot of what you just said. This season was not bad. This was not a bad year for Braylon Allen, but it also didn't feel like a year in which he particularly excelled and really surged his way into this RB1 spot like I was hoping he would, with the background and the athleticism, the size, all of those things that he has. So right now, Braylon Allen is 12th on my board because I'm just waiting to see. I don't want to spoil anything, but that's kind of where the running backs live on my board right now. It really is a product of, I don't necessarily love any of these guys right now. And we're going to find out over the course of the next few months when we get into the testing portion and then obviously the draft situation. But even before that point, just figuring out kind of what are you in the NFL. And to your point, I do think that when you factor in all of these elements of, he's younger than them all, he's bigger than them all, there is that player here that could be a little bit of an off-season warrior that starts to gain some traction simply based on the profile. But when we dive into running back film, that will start to get a little bit more clear on my end as well.
Yeah, I think that he will likely end up being like the consensus RB1 just because of the the quote unquote profile of the player. And I would be happy to take him as my running back especially if he's falling like this and you're like in need of a running back. Obviously, like you said, draft spot dependent for pretty much the rest of these guys, I'd say. It will affect their draft position specifically. But yeah, I like Braylon Allen, and we'll see how that shakes out throughout the rest of this offseason. I'm interested to see, like, the combine stuff will be really interesting because it looked like he didn't have as much juice as he had last year. It did seem like he was hampered a little bit by those injuries. And then, what the official height and weight is will be pretty, intriguing. Whether that matters or not, I don't know. But there's a lot of things that are still pending about the running back specifically, but also Braylon Allen in particular.
Well, here's where I think it does matter quite a bit. And this was something that got brought up earlier in the year, and we sort of disagreed with this, and I still disagree with it as a player comp. But in terms of process, A.J. Dillon is going to be a name here that I think gets brought up because you have a player that has this rare combination of elite, like, I can't even call it elite size because, like, it's almost like unprecedented size. Like, for a guy, if he truly comes in at 246, 6'3", 245, but he's like ripped, he's like a toned 245. That is not dissimilar to AJ Dillon in a way, who came in, who tested unbelievable. People started throwing out the words Derrick Henry when they talked about AJ Dillon. And lo and behold, he did get round 2 NFL draft capital. That was kind of enough to get him into that spot, despite some, questionable college film. So that's sort of where this all starts to matter. And
he also, spoiler, did not turn into Derrick Henry also.
Yes, right.
Let's just make sure we get to that point.
Yeah, and that's the scary thing when you bring up the name A.J. Dillon is, oh boy, we saw what that turned into. But the last thing I do want to say, just because I feel like I've said this a lot, and I do want to clarify this because I understand, like, obviously landing spot and draft capital matters for every single player in Dynasty. Like, it comes into the equation for 95% of the players. This running back class is a perfect example, though, of when it matters a lot. And that's why it keeps getting brought up. Like, last year, it was like, I don't care where Bijan goes. I'll take him at any spot. Like, I don't care where Gibbs goes. I didn't really care where Charbonnet went. I mean, he went to pretty much the worst spot, and I was still drafting him in the mid-first. Like, this year is different. And that's why it comes up more and more this year. It's a product of the running back class. These are just not, at this point in time, in my eyes, difference-making running backs. And that is why it's going to be a lot of where did you go and where did they take you?
I just want Braylon Allen to be a Raven.
You've been on this when we're going to get to landing spots, the perfect matches in February. Yeah. I already know this one.
Yeah, this one I got it drawn up. I got the heart tattoo on my shoulder with the Ravens logo and Braylon Allen's name because, man, having him beating up the inside of the line while Lamar can work the outsides and then Keaton Mitchell being the change of pace. Oh!
Boom.
That'd be nice.
That's a pretty picture you just painted right there. Yeah. I like that a lot.
Just put him in the Gus Edwards role and see how the offense flourishes.
All right. 7th overall.
Oh, I know who this is.
I spoiled it that it's not going to be a running back. And do you know who this is? You might.
I think I do.
I'm taking Troy Franklin.
Not who I thought it was going to be.
That's what I'm saying, because I didn't think I was taking him here. I put together my board here to prepare for this, and I was a little bit shocked at where I ended up with Franklin. But I do think this is where we came. This is what happens. we spend all season talking about the player. So impressed with his 2023 campaign. So impressed. And I don't know that it's not a name that has necessarily like transcended into the like national spotlight yet. I think like Odunze, he became that guy as Washington pushed for the playoffs. Yeah. And his dad's on Twitter fighting people.
Yeah, I love that.
Troy Franklin is not what I would consider one of these like no doubt like number one wide receivers with like almost no like flaws. Like he is a little bit more like specialized in what he does, I think, than some of these other players ahead of him. But that being said, what he does so well that it's hard to ignore the talent at this point. What was the big word with Troy Franklin this season? Separation. He is a classic outside X vertical separator. And all of his other routes, all of the other work that he does, it all comes off of that threat of I can beat you deep on any play. And for a player who is 6'4", 190, that is a tantalizing combination. And so I do think that he will get round 1 NFL draft capital. I do think this is that caliber of a wide receiver. And in that case, I am very comfortable taking him in the mid-first this year.
Yeah, I mean, Troy Franklin is insanely good. If you like Malik Neighbors, you know, the Netflix suggested will be Troy Franklin. You know, if you liked watching Malik Neighbors, you'll also like watching Troy Franklin because it's a similar style of a player. Troy Franklin is incredible separator. There's a mixture of patience and suddenness in this player where he can get you off your spot. He'll get you off balance. You try to press him, he attacks. Like, he is not a passive player when he's running routes. You are going to be reacting to Troy Franklin, and that is where he racks up almost 1,400 yards this season. I remember you bringing him up early in the process before, I think it was in the preseason, talking about, you know, could he I think he'll improve on what he did last year. Like he could get to 1,000 yards, and then, you know, he eclipses that by week 11, and it's like, all right, here we are. You know, Troy Franklin is real. He's another one of these great separators with size. Though the worry was maybe his weight is a little low. Doesn't matter. Don't care. I'm not taking it into account anymore. You're 6'3", 190. That's big. Sorry. That's not even small anymore.
Nope.
So the ability he has as a separator, combined with the few contested catch opportunities that you see him have, only 19 on the season. He converted 7 of them, which is pretty solid. I mean, it's not Rome, but it's really good because Rome is just an outlier. So 37% is a great number to be at when it comes to turning in contested catches. I mean, I feel great about, again, drafting this guy in the middle of the first round. This is the first guy where I'm not sure if he can be a wide receiver 1 in the NFL, and that's fine because like he will be a productive wide receiver 2 in an offense that has upside to get you like 20 fantasy points in any given game because he can take the top off and he can be a target hog. So he can absolutely get peppered. He can run after the catch and he can beat people deep. So he just has a great skill set. And I mean, man, this wide receiver class is unreal.
It's crazy. And one thing I do want to say, you brought up a number with Malik Neighbors. You did a little bit of a similarity, a stylistic comp at the start of this discussion. There was a point in time where you said every single game this season, Neighbors has at least a 30-yard gain. Troy Franklin, it took him until the conference championship game, number 2 against Washington, to not have at least a 30-yard gain in a game this season. He is the definition of a big play threat at the X wide receiver position.
Man, what a good group of players.
We're not done yet, man.
I know.
Let's keep them rolling.
Let's do it. So
8th overall.
8th overall. Can't believe this player fell to me.
Yep.
Caleb Williams.
There it is.
Come home. Come home. Contrary to popular belief, Caleb Williams is good at football. We made it. We made it, Austin. We said it was going to happen, and we've finally made it to the offseason discussions that Caleb Williams is not good. And I mean, we're laughing, but it's true. Like, people wholeheartedly are going on talk shows and saying, like, oh, this kid is going to be whatever. So I mean, there's some things that are wrong with Caleb Williams, yes. But the things he does well is special, is not teachable. The pocket sense that he has is insane. The amount of arm angles he can throw from is ridiculous. Like, I saw an argument, CJ Stroud as a prospect versus Caleb Williams as a prospect. And, like, hindsight is 2020. But Caleb Williams is a better prospect than Stroud was. And, you know, now you see what Stroud is doing in the NFL, and you see how the end of the season went for Caleb Williams, and you're like, well, that's blasphemy. Like, Stroud is every bit as good. Like, no, he's like, Caleb Williams is special. The arm talent is incredible. The ways that he can manipulate a defense with his scrambling and his running is insane. And some of the just astonishing throws that he makes on the run is rare. So let's not overcomplicate things. Let's not, get into comparing him to whoever, and let's keep a level head. He's going to be the number 1 pick come draft day. I don't know if it's going to be by the Bears or if they're going to trade out of that pick, but whoever is getting him is going to have a franchise-altering player.
Yeah, this was a very tough call for me. I have 2 players above Caleb Williams, who sits at number 8 on my board right now. Is this the player you thought I was going to take at 6?
Yes.
I thought about it.
Yeah.
Like the discrepancy there, where it's like, is Troy Franklin a number 1 wide receiver in the NFL? Is X player who's coming up next for me a number 1 wide receiver in the NFL? Or do I just take this player, right, who is a special player at number 6 overall? Well, we have him here at 7, and that is still extremely high for a quarterback in 1 quarterback scoring, if you ask me, and we do 1 quarterback plus here. This is where he should go. And
this is pick 8.
Is it?
Marvin.
Oh, yeah, I forgot about Braylon Allen. Yeah. Okay. So pick 8. Right. So this is what
it was a fine pick. Okay, relax.
I didn't say it wasn't. I just said if I forgot. Caleb Williams, man, it reminds me so much of Mahomes. Yeah. Like, we started the discussion in the summer already doing the whole Mahomes Caleb Williams thing. Come full circle to now, not only are we talking like comparable stylistically, comparable arm talent wise, now we're talking about similar in how they were viewed as NFL prospects. I still think Caleb's going number 1. I don't think that's going to change. But this nitpicking of his flaws is the same thing that happened with Patrick Mahomes, and it's what lets a player like that fall to the 10th pick. This is why I don't think it's going to happen again, because you let Mahomes fall, you're not going to let Williams fall. That's where we're at, because I'm not going to say he's bust proof. I'm not going to say he's a perfect prospect. I'm not going to say there aren't things he absolutely needs to work on, but let's not overthink it. The arm talent is special. It is absolutely special. We've seen it so many times over the last 2 years, and including this year, in which was a down year and what's going on and all of this. Think back to the early parts of the season, and I get it. Who were they playing back then? You know, it wasn't who they were playing when they were getting shellacked every week or in these like 50-40 shootouts every week. The throws are the throws, and he made those throws all season long. The arm talent that this player has is truly special, and I really don't think we should think too hard about this. And that's what I'm going to say. We're going to get to talk more about Caleb, his strengths, his weaknesses, and all of that next week when we talk about quarterbacks in detail. But for right now, we're still here with him.
Yeah, a few things I just want to touch on is USC was a more balanced offense this year. They tried to be. They, committed a lot to Marshawn Lloyd and, getting the ground game going. He had 100 less pass attempts this season. He had a higher completion percentage. He had 12 less touchdowns with 100 less attempts. He had 5 more the same amount of interceptions, 5 total. His time to throw was down by 1/10 of a second, which is not much, but speeds up your process a little bit. So those are just a couple numbers where it's like, he took a sack on 23% of pressures. Like he held the ball a little too long quite a few times. He fumbled a lot. That was the big thing. It was a weekly occurrence at one point where it was like, oh man, that was a bad sack that he took, a bad fumble. He had 16 total fumbles. So that is up from 6 last year. So that wasn't like an issue that we were looking at coming into the year. It was an issue this year. But I still think that, like, if a team lets him fall, that's going to be just one of those mistakes that gets etched in NFL history. So here we are. Number
9. I just referenced this. I had 2 wide receiver 1 question mark players ahead of Caleb Williams. One was Troy Franklin. The other is the player I'm taking right now, which is Emeka Egbuka. I still love this player's talent. And to be quite honest with you, I think this range in the draft is perfect for him. Mm-hmm. It's perfect for him. I mean, it's going to be a common thing, I think, to hear a little bit of like, this is JSN, like I've already heard that a little bit, like, oh, this is like the JSN player, where it's like he was the number 1 wide receiver last year, but he'd be like the wide receiver 7 in this class or something. And I don't necessarily agree with that. I think we were higher on JSN than a lot of people, but the point remains the same, that this was the player that took over his role. And it was a player that we felt very good about taking over this slot role in the Ohio State offense. It just so happens that Egbuka dealt with some injuries this year, and we never really got to see the full product. We know we talked about it with Marvin, the quarterback woes, the offensive woes in the passing game that they had, couple that with an injury, and suddenly it's like, people start forgetting about the level of talent that Emeka Egbuka has. But this was both of our wide receiver 2s in this class heading into the year. And I think this conversation of like high floor, low ceiling is going to get brought up with Egbuka, and I'm just done with that. Like, I'm not labeling slot players as low ceiling anymore because it's not a thing. And I still think this player has the ability and the talent to be a very, very good wide receiver at the NFL level.
I think Egbuka could be the best value wide receiver come draft day because, number one, it seems like he's the odd man out so far when it comes to the mocks that are happening and how this wide receiver class is being talked about. And that's has a lot to do with the injury and the quarterback play. We talked about McCord with Marvin Harrison. It's like, yeah, he was bad. And Egbuka is a result of that. He had 451 yards, and he very well could be a second-round pick in the NFL draft this year. And then he's going to fall in your dynasty draft because he went in the second round of the NFL draft. And he also has not declared yet. So, this is also pending a decision. But and after a 451-yard season, that's why I bring it up. You never know. But all of the best wide receivers in the NFL play in the slot. It's just a thing now. You look at Kupp, you look at Diggs, you look at Jefferson. I mean, you can go down the list. Chase plays in the slot. Amon-Ra plays almost exclusively in the slot. Like, you look at a team and you look at how they deploy their best players. The best way to get your best player away from coverage is to get them off the line of scrimmage, get them in motion, and the best way to do that is to put them in the slot. So we can put the slot thing is bad to rest. Being a slot player is not a downside.
Yep.
And we had a lengthy discussions about that last year with JSN because he is a slot guy, and then he went somewhere where he can thrive in the slot. And the production isn't there, but you can see how good he is. And Egbuka can do the exact same thing. And I think he's going to be a steal come Dynasty Draft Day, come NFL Draft Day, and he's going to make a team very happy because he is another very polished receiver. I mean, a 1,200-yard receiver last year that is hampered by many things this year. And hopefully he comes out, but I'd understand if he didn't.
Yeah, I think he absolutely should. I mean, it's with the again, it's like McCord's transferring. There's more uncertainty. I get there's these rumors with NIL, and we're going to talk about that with another player at some point.
We can talk about it now if you want.
Well,
okay, you're right.
Might be
we'll talk about him next.
But no, I think take this opportunity. Go to the NFL. The player has the talent. We know he has the talent based on 2022 film. Get into the league, make your money there because it's easy to forget. It's easy to forget just how good he is after a year like this, but I'm not going to do it. And this slot stuff is a completely tired narrative. It's a cop-out. It's a talking point to fill space when it's like, what else do I say? Oh, he's a slot player, low ceiling. It's not a thing anymore. If any player broke the mold, I mean, I'll even take Cooper Kupp out of the equation. If any player broke the mold, it's Amon-Ra St. Brown, who comes in as a day 2 wide receiver prospect with 11 guys in front of him, comes into an offense.
Do you think he can name all 11 guys?
I've heard that he can. And becomes their wide receiver 1 and becomes a top 6 dynasty wide receiver. I mean, there's no reason at a talent level that Egbuka could not do the same thing. That's how much talent I believe that this player has in the right situation. He could absolutely become that level of a talent in the NFL. So
Josh Downs, slot only player.
Who?
Josh Downs.
Oh, Downs. Yeah. Yep. Again.
Keenan Allen.
Yep. How many?
CeeDee Lamb.
Keep them coming. I mean, seriously, it's like half the league at this point.
Keenan Allen plays 59% of the snaps out of the slot. CeeDee Lamb plays 58% of the snaps out of the slot. Amon-Ra plays 56%. Like, you talk about some of the best receivers in the league, and they're playing. Tyreek Hill plays 39% of the snaps out of the slot. Like, that's how they get them open.
Yep.
They get off of the coverage, they get off of the press, get these guys in motion, and get them cooking.
Yep. Number 10. That's where we are.
Yeah, we are. We're at Travion Henderson.
There it is.
There it is. Travion was let's get it out of the way at the top, because we don't know. There's rumors out that Travion might go back to Ohio State, and I don't know what to think about the rumors, because none of them are like verified, really. It's just the random Ohio State accounts, the Silver Dome or whatever. I don't know. the Buckeye Inquirer, whatever. Yeah. So those are the rumors. So they're unsubstantiated, but rumors nonetheless that he might go back to school for the NIL money. I don't know. I don't believe it. These are my big picture thoughts about it.
Yep.
Is the 2024 class is weak. Like, for an NFL team that is looking for a running back, this is one of the first names that's going to come off the list if he's in this class. And it's probably going to be second round draft capital. If you look at the 2025 class, it is not weak. Travion might not be a top 3 running back in that class. So that's where I'm at. Is I don't know why he would stay. He's got some injury history. He ended the year really strong. Just take this and roll it into the NFL. Get that guaranteed money from that rookie contract and move on. That's how I feel.
I am very divided on this, because on one hand, it's I understand the state of the running back in the NFL is that they're not getting paid, and that the short shelf life is scary for a player like this, who is now facing the opportunity to make potentially millions of dollars in college. So, okay, stay the one extra year, make some extra money, get into the NFL, hope that you still get drafted in a range in which you can make a solid chunk of cash on your rookie deal, and hope you get paid. I mean, you end up in the same bucket. So it's it's a year of extra money, but the risk is you might go lower in the draft and make less with your rookie. I mean, there's a lot of different ways to look at it. And the reason, and Marvin gets brought into this too, that's not a thing. They cannot pay him enough to get him to stay in school if he's looking at a 3rd overall or whatever rookie contract in the NFL. That's not a thing. This at least makes some sense. And I think it factors into these things like what we saw last year with, Korff goes back to school. Well, why did he do that? Well, he's making a little bit of money, and he's a player that, we've already talked about his shortcomings potentially as a long-term NFL running back piece. All of that is to say, Travion is my running back 1. If he declares, as of this point in time, he is my running back 1, and he's my 10th player on the board right now. He has the talent that we saw in 2021. It didn't go anywhere. 2022, based on what I saw this year, was an anomaly based on most likely health. And that run that he had over the middle and towards the end of this year, where he looked like that player, this is one of the only running backs right now that I can see as a NFL starter that makes a difference for whatever team picks him. He's not going to be a first round running back. I think he'd be a second round running back if he comes out. So that to me is a running back 1 potential player in a class like this. And I really hope that he comes out, because this class desperately needs that player.
Yeah. The tweet that I found from Christian Williams at C. Williams NFL. Said Marvin Harrison Jr. and Travion Henderson have allegedly been offered NIL deals that rival first-round pick money to keep them at Ohio State for the 2024 season. Now, I don't that's a lot of money. So, no, first of all, that's not how that works. You just don't have an unlimited budget to give players, and especially Marvin Harrison, who would be likely a top 5 pick. And you look at Will Anderson, he made $29 million. Ohio State can't give him that.
Right.
So Marvin Harrison is going into the draft. Let's get that out of the way. Travion, on the other hand, if they're offering him $10 million, maybe
that kind of be stupid. If it's $10 million,
then you got to take it. That's what I'm saying.
Take it
because that's what would be rivaling first round pick. So if that's substantiated at all, then you probably go back. But if it's anything at or below what you're going to get as probably top half of the second round pick, then you got to go. And so I also hope he goes because, it's slim pickings for running backs in this class.
It sure is. And I'm up here at number 11, and I'm not taking a running back. And I'm not taking a wide receiver either, because I'm taking Drake May. I've pounded this time and time again. The talent discrepancy between Caleb Williams and Drake May is not extreme. Right now, I have them next to each other on my draft board. Caleb comes in at 8. Drake May comes in at 9. That's where I'm at with these players. I think they are both high-end, superstar level quarterback prospects that can be difference makers in fantasy early in their careers. And the narratives that you brought up with Caleb Williams, and this is obviously something that we will get to unpack next week. The narratives with Williams are different, but not entirely dissimilar to what is starting to happen with Drake May, specifically about the stats that he put up this year. I think there is a contingency of people. Yeah. And maybe these aren't people I should be listening to. Maybe this is Twitter hive people.
He's worse this year.
But that's what you hear, is that he regressed. He's got turnover issues now. This is Mitch Trubisky 2.0, North Carolina quarterback, blah, blah, blah. All you have to do, man, all you have to do is just watch a couple of these games. It's not hard. Stop looking at the stats. Watch what Drake May does. This was not a star-studded team that he was working with. He lost his wide receiver 1, a player that has proven to be a high-end NFL player in Josh Downs. Tez Walker comes in later in the year, and that was a boost to this offense. It was a big boost to this offense, and one that needed it because there's nobody else there. What Drake May was doing to carry this team as a ranked team earlier in the year, and then you come to find out later in the year, this was not that team. A lot of that has to do with the quarterback and what he was doing, working with a team and making it more than the sum of its parts. He's an elite quarterback prospect, and he should go number 2. There's going to be all sorts of conversations. Will he even go number 1? I don't think it's going to come to that, but I do think it's not hard. If there's a quarterback needy team at 1 and a quarterback needy team at 2, Drake May goes number 2, and you should feel great about it. It's not Mitch Trubisky, okay? It's not even close to that. This is a very different player with way better arm talent and way better everything.
So he declared yesterday, and I don't know why there's this discourse going on, man. Like, why do we have to do this every year? We have two very fun quarterback prospects, and the take cycle just is so oversaturated, where you got to find, like, why is this player bad? Like, we have to get to that point with every player. And yes, he had a worse season this year than he did last year. That is true. I think the tape will show that also. But I think there's also a variety of reasons for that. He's physically gifted. He's a good runner, which is, the thing we look for in fantasy. Both him and Caleb Williams have that. He's a great, like, improviser in and out of the pocket. He also, when it comes to platforms, Caleb Williams is obviously the gold standard, throwing off of different platforms, but Drake May can set up and fire some ridiculous throws. Like, he had a throw where he kind of backed up, half rolled out right, and saw somebody win deep and just planted his feet and gunned it. He didn't even step into it. 55 yards on the money. And that's the type of throws that are just incredible. And that's why he'll be in the conversation for the number one pick. And talked about his rushing, like against NC State, week 13, he had 105 yards rushing. He had 582 yards rushing on the season, 9 touchdowns. Like this, he's a very good running quarterback. He uses it as a last resort, but when he goes, he goes. And he also, I mean, like I said, the on the run and off platform stuff is really, really nice with him. So I like Drake May a lot. This is exactly where I had him.
I think one of the best ways to speak to this season at a statistical level is to say that while he did regress in yards and touchdowns, and he threw more picks, and he certainly didn't lead college football in passing, but what he did do was lead college football in big time throws. And if we remember back to last year, he also led college football in big time throws. He has played college football for 2 years. He has led college football in these NFL caliber throws.
What's a big time throw? Could you explain that to the crowd?
Yeah, this is another PFF number, but it's one that I actually like quite a bit.
It is a good one.
This is the definition of what a big time throw is from PFF. A pass with excellent ball location and timing, generally thrown further down the field and or into a tighter window. They try to identify NFL level throws when they grade, chart, whatever they do with these guys. They try to identify those throws and put it into a number. Drake May has more of those throws in the last 2 years than anybody else in college football as a redshirt freshman and a redshirt sophomore. He is a bona fide quarterback one prospect that just so happens to be in a class with another bona fide quarterback one prospect. That's where we're at.
Yeah, the top of this draft is, they're going to be talking about it. Talking the air out of this, which is fun because
it is. Yeah.
You need a good top 2 quarterback controversy, conversation, whatever, to fuel the offseason fires. So I'm excited to see where this goes.
We have 1 pick left in our 2024 Dynasty Rookie Mock 2.0, Collin. So bring it home for us.
Do I end with my head or my heart is the question.
How do you draft?
I mean, drafting with my heart has gotten me in trouble.
Well, let's get into some
I
trouble.
think you know exactly who I'm talking about. But I am taking. Wow, am I going to do this? Devin Neal at number 12. We're full circle.
Wondering if you were going to do it.
Yeah, I'm going to do it. I mean, Devin Neal had a fantastic season. He's a Kansas running back. He had 1,200 yards rushing, 15 touchdowns, put the ball on the ground one time all season. And he's just an impressive player. He's 5'11", 210. He's really fast, very twitchy. The elusiveness that he has in the open field is really nice. He seems like he has good vision. We'll break more of that down come film time when we can actually watch every play from the all 22 angles. But I just, with the 183 carries, 6.6 yards per attempt. It's just impressive. Like against the good teams, he had 5.6 yards per carry against Texas. Not only 8 carries in that game. Oklahoma, he had 112 yards and a touchdown. Cincinnati, he had 106 yards and 2 touchdowns. Like, it's not like he was beating up on all the bad teams. He did it against everybody. And he's a good pass catcher, which is really what brings him into this conversation is, you know, if you're playing half PPR, that's where I think Devin Neal starts to come into the conversation. He's a really good player in open space. He has good hands. Routes, don't know how many routes he runs, what kind of routes he runs, but I know he can get the ball out of the backfield and work. So how much of a reach do you think this is?
I mean, I'm not going to say it's a reach because what I'm just thinking about my brain.
You never fall into my traps, like my clickbait traps. You're too level-headed.
Yeah, that's what we're all about here at Camp Dynasty. We try to fight the man here that wants to make sports media into screaming and hot takes. But what I was coming back to while you were talking there is that last year at this time, a player that I have soft comped Devin Neal to was not in this discussion at all, and it was Kendre Miller. Big 12 running back, kind of came out of nowhere, kind of like him, don't really know about him yet. Got through the process, got through the draft. Kendre Miller ends the year as my 13th player in the class. Devin Neal, we're in a similar spot. Would have not talked about Kendre in this spot 1 year ago today. There's no such thing as a reach right now because it's a very fluid process. And I think Devin Neal has been a player that has shown us a lot this year and has shown that he is an NFL running back. I think the lack of coverage, noise, like this is just a name that you don't ever hear from anybody really. And
here, tell you what.
Yeah.
He's getting all his coverage on Camp Dynasty.
We're championing him because that's it. I mean, and it's a good player. Like it is a player that when you watch these games, when you watch these plays and you sit down and you think, what is this player? He looks like that sort of a dude with the size, the speed, the athleticism, the change of direction, the contact balance. I mean, he's even got a little bit of that with all of that. So it's a player that I think is going to grow. If he declares, I think he will be in for a sort of, oh, yeah, Devin Neal. And in March, it'll seem like this was a player that was here all along. But we just so happen to be in front of the pack here. Now, am I hurt that you're taking Neal over Trey Benson? A little bit, but it's okay.
That was my heart over my head decision.
Yeah, I get it.
Maybe the smart thing to do is take Benson, but I just wanted to, get the media coverage on Devin
I love
Neal.
it. Now in 6 months, we can clip it.
And then we'll have the graphic.
Hey.
Yeah. And they'll be like, we had him as a first rounder.
Yeah. Yep.
I'm still waiting for our social guy to get back to us on getting our Puka clips published.
Yeah, I got to get on the phone with this guy. We need victory laps ASAP. Figure this out. Come on. Well, there it is, man. That we did it. That's 12 picks, 2024. We're 7-8 months out from the draft, but it's never too early to start talking about it, and especially now, like I said at the top, with fantasy seasons reaching their conclusion, starts to get more and more real. I know where my picks are. I know kind of what's going on. Now let's get into it here. Obviously, it's a deep class, it's a talented class. We only did 12 picks, and I just want to provide an opportunity here to shout out a few favorites that just missed the cut. Obviously, mine. It's Trey Benson, 11th player on my board right now. That is a drop for him. I still had him at number 5 in the midseason check-in. I've dropped him. I'm coming to terms with the fact that he is not necessarily a complete running back in an eval sense, but I still have a lot of faith in his talent, and I think he was underutilized in this Florida State offense. So that is certainly my favorite player that was left out of our mock draft today.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, my heart was saying Devin Neal, but my head was saying Trey Benson. He is a really good player, and we've been talking about him all season. And I mean, if you take him in the first, you should feel good about that. Like, he's going to be right there for you. And another guy that I'll just list off a couple, like my remaining honorable mentions is Bucky Irving, Blake Corum, Brian Thomas, and A.D. Mitchell.
Yep.
Those are my couple guys that were like, hard quote first out, unquote, if 5 guys can be the first out. Yeah.
Brian Thomas Jr. is my 13th player right now. He's my first man out of the first round. He's my brand of receiver.
He is.
I hope he doesn't. I hope when I watch, I'm very hesitant about this now because I've been burned one too many times with these guys, and I'm starting to swing the other way. I think I'm starting to find that I like separators a little bit more than I used to, but Brian Thomas Jr. has no problem separating vertically. We've seen that time and time again, and I think he's just a really fun player with a really high ceiling at the NFL level. And then, Blake Corum is in that mix as well, top of the second. And I'll shout out a couple IDPs here that kind of get into the conversation at this spot. Jeremiah Trotter Jr. is a player that I still really like. And I don't know what's going to happen with him in the NFL draft or any of that stuff. I mean, we're a long ways away from that, obviously, but I like the talent a lot. I think he's worthy of this sort of high second, kind of like the prototypical linebacker spot in a dynasty rookie draft. I think he's there. And then the other guy that I'm going to shout out is Peyton Wilson, who just impressed me so much this year. I think he was really a riser. I think it was a guy that, there's a little bit of that medical hesitancy with him, with the red flags that he does have, but I think he's put enough on tape for the last 2 years, and specifically this year, to put himself in this sort of LB1, LB2 conversation in this draft class.
Some guys that got badges throughout the season. Braylon Trice out of Washington. Jerzon Newton, Illinois.
Yep.
Yeah. I was going to say, I was picturing them, and I was like, is that right? Jeremiah Trotter, of course, who you just mentioned. And then there's, like Dallas Turner, Chop Robinson, who are also some names to keep an eye on throughout this process. So we'll have a full IDP breakdown, coming up.
5 weeks. We'll get to talk about that. But Bear Carter went back to school. We called it.
Yeah, we did. Heard it here first, folks.
So he's going back. There was a lot of surprise and shock. People still had him ranked pretty highly from what I was seeing from guys that were saying, oh, my linebacker 2 is going back to school. I mean, yeah, I think there's a reason for that because he wasn't that great. But anyway, okay, no more victory laps for us. This was a very fun exercise to do here. I mean, this is really the first step, the culmination of what we've been doing for the last several months here, getting to this point. And then, like I said, it starts with a mock draft, but it really starts to turn up in the next coming weeks here because we get into positional rankings. There is no more, I got to watch the tape, or I'm not quite sure if he does this well yet. We're going to find all of that out over the next 5 weeks. And that starts with quarterbacks next week. And we go through them all leading up to our big board update, which I think takes us right about to the Senior Bowl, Collin. So that's how quickly this stuff goes now. It is draft season, baby, and I'm ready for it.
I can't believe how quickly everything went this year. It felt like last year, we started this last year, and it felt like every week was so, like, substantial. Like, it was everything, every time was big. And then this year, it just felt like it flew by. Yep. And it's draft season again. And I mean, I'm so excited to get into these rankings episode. They're by far my favorite that we get to do. I mean, the mock draft stuff is also really exciting, but you know, the week to week stuff is great, but it also gets a little repetitive. And then you get to break out of that and get into the real draft season when, you know, people's teams are changing for the future of their franchise. And that's fun stuff. That's the fun part of Dynasty.
And there's going to be some really fun discussions this year. I think last year was fun, but there were sort of these templates with certain position groups. I think it kind of early in the process, you kind of got to know some of the players. And this year, I think it is a bit of pick your flavor with some of these groups, namely running back. That's going to be a very interesting episode. We got a little bit of a teaser here, but film could change that real quick when we get into it. And next week, Collin, the quarterback conversation, that's going to be a fun one too, because we know Caleb Williams, Drake May. Where does Jaden Daniels fit into this? Where does Michael Penix fit in these days? Is Bo Nix here? You know, where are we at this point? So it's gonna be a lot of fun, and I'm very excited to get into it. Heisman winner, Jaden Daniels. Look at how far we've come.
600 yards in a game, all purpose.
And people were pissed about that. And I'm just like so sickened that people didn't think that this was a special year because the team went 9-3.
Yeah, I mean, that's a whole nother.
People said, oh, he didn't have a Heisman moment. I feel like his Heisman moment was that Florida game. Am I crazy? Like,
you're not. That
was one of the most insane quarterback performances I've ever seen. In
literally
football.
Putting the team on his back. Like, yes, that was his Heisman moment, was an entire game.
Man.
But
all right.
Anyway,
well,
he didn't have a 4th and 20.
Yeah. Yeah.
Threw it in the back of the end zone.
Yep. If you enjoyed our 2024 Rookie Mock 2.0, be sure to find us on X, formerly known as Twitter, at Camp_Dynasty, and TikTok at Camp.Dynasty. And also check out our YouTube channel where video feeds of the pods do go up every single week. And of course, be sure to like, rate, review, subscribe, share, follow, and anything else that I missed to the pod feed, which is still home here at Camp Dynasty.
That's right. Counselor's cabin.
That's right.
All right. Season is here.
It's here, man. And it's only up from here. The excitement's here. You can feel it. It's palpable right now. And I'm ready to do the damn thing. So we're going to continue with this journey next week. And for now, thanks for stopping by, Camp Dynasty. And we'll see you next week.